Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lucette de Metz. I'm the Head of Urban Innovation for London and Partners. For those of you who don't know us, we're London's international trade, investment and promotion agency. It's my pleasure to be your chair for today's panel discussion, which is entitled Smart Cities, Engaging with Citizens to Accelerate Green Solutions. Today's conversation will very much focus on how the use of innovative technology can support the transition towards green cities while empowering citizens. So we'll be sharing some examples of how that can work through some pilots that have happened, but it'll also be an opportunity to discuss future implementation and explore paths for better city business engagement. Before we start, I'd like to thank New London Architecture for organizing today's event, which is taking place in partnership with Sharing Cities and London Partners. Today's event is also part of a wider initiative called London Circular Economy Week, organized by the London Waste and Recycling Board. So for those of you interested in more information on their broader activities, you can visit the website on ceweek.london. The format for today is we'll shortly have a few presentations from our four speakers, which will be followed by panel discussion and Q&A. So there will be an opportunity, and we highly encourage our audience to be participative and to ask any questions, which you can do by using the Zoom Q&A feature, which should show up at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So please do feel free to submit your questions throughout, and we'll try and pick up as many as we can in the second part of today's event. Without further ado, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for today, which is Nathan Pearce. Nathan's head of the Smart London team at the Greater London Authority and also the Sharing Cities Programme Director. Nathan will give us a short introduction to the Sharing Cities Programme, which is a Horizon 2020 funded Smart Cities Lighthouse project. Over to you, Nathan.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you very much for inviting me here to you, London and Partners, and to New London Architecture as well. As you said, my name is Nathan Pearce. I'm head of the Smart London team. And the Smart London team at the Greater London Authority, our main task is to support the Chief Digital Officer, Theo Blackwell, in delivering the Mayor's Smarter London Together strategy, which is all about bringing various stakeholders together across public sector, private sector, the 32 boroughs, to do more in terms of making London the smartest city in the world. This involves looking at more user-centered design, how we engage with our citizens, increasing digital skills in the capital, making sure that we have smart streets and that we're as connected as possible, and encouraging collaboration as much as possible as well. Something that we're really keen to do in London is to take more advantage of our scale. So part of my role there, again, Lisa, as you said, I am Programme Director of Sharing Cities. Sharing Cities is an international Horizon 2020 programme that covers 6 cities. So the 3 lighthouse cities are Greenwich in London, Milan in Italy and Lisbon in Portugal. And then we have 3 fellow cities who are there to observe and to replicate the work that we've done, which is Bordeaux in France, Warsaw in Poland, and Burgas in Bulgaria. So it's a big project, big program, about 24 million in funding. We've got 35 partners that span big companies like Siemens to small startups, lots of academic institutions, and obviously the public sector bodies as well. And what we're doing in Sharing Cities is we're testing 10 types of smart, innovative technology, or at least it was innovative when we wrote the bid 6 years ago. Some of it's maybe not so innovative anymore. But what we're doing is the research development program looking at how this technology can work, and also the impact of deploying multiple types of technology in a small area or district at the same time, and how those types of technology interplay with each other. So the things that we've done include retrofitting buildings to make them more energy efficient, and from that we have seen around 50% energy reductions in some of our buildings, which is really fantastic. We've deployed multiple types of electric and low carbon mobility solutions, from electric bikes to EV charging to converting council fleets into electric fleets. We've done lots in terms of smart street infrastructure, so smart lampposts in particular. We've deployed around 1,500 and over 80 different types of sensors. We've done a lot in terms of energy management, how you manage various inputs and outputs from different kind of renewable energy sources across multiple buildings to drive more energy efficiency. And from that, we've seen a further reduction in around 10% of energy use. We have done quite a lot in terms of data platforms, the glue that brings all of this together, how we extract data from all of this infrastructure and use it to make more evidence-based service design and policy decisions. And then finally, we've done a lot in terms of citizen engagement, which is what you're going to hear more about today. And this has been everything from how you involve the citizen in the design of this technology right from the very beginning through to something that we call our digital social market, which we're very proud of. So I'm just going to say a little bit more about digital social market. Again, you're going to hear much more detail about how this has been deployed in each of the 3 cities. Our digital social market was designed and developed by Connected Places Catapult. Some of you might know them formally as Future Cities Catapult, who are a key partner in Sharing Cities. And basically it's an incentivization mechanism, a digital incentivization mechanism that encourages people to choose low carbon and energy efficient choices where they are able to. So for example, instead of driving your car into a city, we would encourage you to use one of the electric bike schemes, or to heat your homes more efficiently. And by doing that, you get some kind of benefit or some kind of incentive. So Connected Places Catapult have set this up using data from the technology and Sharing Cities, and they've built their own applications, a different system in each of the 3 lighthouse cities that automate this process and bring together local government, businesses and the citizens. So you're going to hear more detail about this, particularly in Greenwich and Milan. And we think that we have developed something which is much more sustainable because it's involved the citizen from the very outset. And I just finish by saying that our strategic aim is to encourage how we scale up what we have tested in Sharing Cities outside of the areas that have been grant funded to the rest of London, to the rest of Lisbon and Milan, and also to other cities across the UK as well. We're looking to scale up what has been proven to work and really try and encourage collaboration between cities and scale up between cities as well, which is why we're really keen to share the results of our work and to generate interest in the conversation and see what opportunities are out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathan. Some great insights there. And for those of you who have just joined us, that was Nathan from the Smart London team, giving an introduction to the Horizon 2020 funded Sharing Cities Lighthouse project. Lots of great work. Today we're going to focus particularly, as you mentioned, on the digital social market tool and citizen engagement, which is a particularly interesting topic as we find that smart cities are increasingly about creating better places for people. And so they are people-led and people-centric and technology-enabled. As Nathan mentioned, our next 2 speakers will be presenting the outcomes from some specific pilots and case studies in the cities of London and Milan on the use of this digital social market tool with a view to reduce energy consumption in buildings and incentivize behavior change. Our first speaker that it gives me great pleasure to welcome is Gemma Hoare, Sharing Cities Community Engagement Officer at the Royal Borough of Greenwich, who will be talking about the Greenwich Energy Heroes project. Over to you, Gemma.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Gemma Hoare. I'm from the Royal Borough of Greenwich, and I'm today going to take you on a real whistle-stop tour of our project called Greenwich Energy Hero. So as Nathan has already mentioned, this is just kind of one measure that we've been implementing as part of the Sharing Cities programme, and it relates to 2 areas of the project. The first is sustainable energy management systems, and the second is a digital social market. So on the next slide, you'll kind of just see a real overview of what a digital social market is. So as Nathan said, it's kind of an approach that we've built as part of the programme, and it's about encouraging citizens to engage in sustainable and smart city services through a reward-based system. And as you're going to hear today, it's been applied to kind of real different use cases in London, Lisbon and Milan. And you can find out more on the Sharing Cities website if you're interested in kind of what it looks like and how it works. So on the next slide, these are kind of the 3 organisations that are involved in Greenwich. So the first is the Future Cities Catapult, or the Connected Places Catapult. They were our work package lead. experts in service design and really coordinated that approach in the 3 cities. Kiwi Power are a local London SME. They are an energy aggregator and real experts in our challenge area, which is demand side response, that you'll hear a little bit about in a minute. And then there's ourselves from the Royal Borough of Greenwich. We're interested in providing, a great service to our residents that meets their needs and meets our ambitions around building a smart and sustainable city. And there is real value in bringing us together around this challenge. So Kiwi's expertise in the energy market, Future Cities Catapult expertise in building great services, and then our knowledge of our residents and the local challenge. So what was our challenge? So on the next slide, you'll see this graph. So our challenge was around demand side response, and I'm presuming that that might be an unfamiliar concept to some. So I'm going to do my best to explain it in a minute or two. So this is the idea that there are peaks in energy demand, particularly in the evening, but also in London, there is a peak in the morning. So this is a graph from the UKPN that talks about kind of electricity use on the national level. So that grey line there is the load of electricity, so the use of electricity. The solid red line is what the network can provide. And then that green area is the area of opportunity. So where there's a peak in demand that's higher than the supply. So if we look at addressing that on the supply side, it's pretty inefficient. What happens is we keep reserve assets online. That's typically older coal polluting power plants that are just used occasionally to meet that peak when it happens. We also have to reinforce the grid so that infrastructure can meet that need for the additional peak. It also means that it's harder to use renewable energy sources because they produce power intermittently. So when it's sunny, when it's windy, which might not coincide with that peak. So this, the idea of demand side response is what, instead of addressing on the supply side, we address the demand of electricity. So we try to reduce demand. It's something that exists in the commercial sector. So large estates with lots of refrigerators or large machinery are incentivized by the national grid to reduce their demand at certain times. And we really wanted to see throughout this project whether it's potential for residential households to act consistently and reliably to reduce their demand, and that perhaps they could take part in this market as well. So on the next image, you'll see, this is a graph of electricity usage of one of our participants. You'll see it's a very similar kind of picture to on the national level, that there's a peak, in this case, it's about an hour in the evening. And if we can encourage people to use electricity outside that window, we can have some really great benefits on the local level and on the national level. So on the next slide, you'll see that we kind of, the GLA estimates that there's 0.5 gigawatts of domestic flexible power within London alone, and that demand side response could reduce network reinforcement costs by up to 30 million in London. And those are savings that could potentially be passed on to consumers in lower energy prices. The calculations that we've been undertaking as part of this programme, we kind of put that value on the household at £5 to £35 a year, but it really depends on kind of, what the national grid might incentivise this area, this market, and how people are really able to respond. So that's what we've been investigating, is how do residents respond to this? So on the next slide, you'll see what this kind of looks like to our users. So we simulate signals from the electricity system operator to citizens, and we ask them to reduce their electricity consumption for an hour, once or twice a month. We give them points for doing so, and we ask them to do things like put the washing machine on at a different time. I think what's really interesting about our deployment of residential side demand side response, as opposed to some others that are kind of emerging, is that anyone can take part in this. As long as your electricity meter isn't too far from your Wi-Fi signal, you can take part. You don't need to have an electric vehicle that you can charge overnight. You don't have to have, snazzy washing machine that connects to the internet. You can take part in this. It's also, we're looking at kind of positive reinforcement, so rewarding people for doing the right thing and not using the electricity during the peak time, rather than negative reinforcement, so like charging you more to use electricity during the peak. So how did we do this? On the next slide, you'll see our first step was to conduct user research. This is it's a complicated concept. I've, explained it very briefly, but how do we communicate this idea to people when we might only have a minute with them as they're, looking at our website, or we're speaking to them when we did recruitment events? How can we communicate this idea? What do people think about it? Is it achievable at all? What behaviours might they be able to change? What might be difficult for them to change? What kind of language do they use around the idea of electricity, so we can really communicate this? So we did a lot of user research, and it was really, really valuable. The next thing we did was to design the service journey. So you'll see that on the next slide. where we kind of took all that research and the research that we did about similar projects, designed a service journey, designed all the communication materials that we need to be able to go on to the next stage, which was recruitment and installation. So we had to install a little bit of equipment that you can see on the left in people's homes, and we worked with a charity called Groundwork, who and their energy green doctors. They're real experts in talking to people about their energy use. So we went to people's homes, we installed the equipment, spoke to them about how it worked, did our monitoring evaluation survey, and then when we left, they were given access to the application on the next slide. So the application, I think the key feature is that image on the left, which is that residents get information about their live electricity usage that updates every 6 to 12 seconds. So if you have a smart meter, it's kind of far more regular than that. It means you kind of can go run around your house and put on your kettle and turn on your TV and plug in your laptop and really see in live, real time, how much electricity you're using. There is also kind of historical usage, energy saving tips, and your hero status, which is the amount of points that you've earned through engaging with the service. So on the next slide, it's kind of, the real key elements of Greenwich Energy Hero. So we ran these peak energy alerts to ask residents to use less electricity. They are assigned points based on their baseline. We defined their baseline as the highest amount of electricity they use over a rolling 4-week period. So we give them points based on the percentage that they were able to use less electricity compared to the highest amount of electricity they've used in the last 4 weeks. You also get some points for logging into the app. So this only happens kind of once or twice a month. So we want to make sure that people, still remain engaged. So there's a couple points available for just logging in, for reading notifications, for doing surveys, but it's really about kind of, asking people to use electricity at different times. And then those points at quarterly intervals, you can convert either into a donation to our charity, which is the Greenwich and Bexley Community Hospice, or you convert into a voucher for yourselves. So only one household in our last voucher conversion period chose to do that. So how's it going on the next slide? So we are almost halfway through the running of this service. So the results that our monitoring evaluation partners at Imperial will be kind of guessing about, is the business model right? Can residents take part in this? Is there value in it? We're not there yet, but what we have done is learn a lot about kind of behaviours and how people are using the app. So we've got some really good feedback from the people that are using it about, about using the app and how that they've managed to change their behaviours. So, the live usage part of the app has had some really good feedback that people have changed their electricity usage based on just having more information about it. On the next slide, you'll see that we have recently done a survey where we kind of asked people about their behaviour and attitudes. So we found that most people signed up to this because of that idea that if more people do this, we can use more renewable energy in the future. We also wanted to know kind of what kind of behaviours people are doing when we ask them to use less electricity. So some appliances people found really easy to use at different times. So things like washing machines, tumble dryers. Some appliances were a lot more difficult, things like things in the kitchen. So we're really kind of beginning to learn a lot about people's behaviours so that we can, pass it on to other projects and, work on this idea that perhaps residents can take part in demand side response in the future. On the next slide, you'll see that we've kind of really begun to kind of document that in a way that we can, be able to share it with other people that are interested in taking part. I think the key learning that I'd draw is that this the real challenge in this is that you have to go into people's homes to install a bit of equipment. That really affected kind of the number of people that signed up to the service because people, it was another step they had to go through. We also had quite a lot of dropout between people signing up for the service and then not actually ever arranging an install. And then also kind of with any digital service, you have a dropout rate once it's operating, but I think given that we've had to go to people's homes to install some equipment, the kind of the value and the loss in that is higher than kind of a regular just, you download an app. So that, I think, is a whistle-stop tour, as I said, of Greenwich Energy Hero. And I'm really happy to kind of answer any further questions that people have at the end.
Thank you, Gemma. A comprehensive whistle-stop tour indeed, and some great early findings and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Particularly struck by the savings that can be made in the energy infrastructure side as well to manage that demand and hopefully paving the way for more renewable energy going forward. So thank you for that. Now gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who's joining us all the way from Milan, the wonders of technology and virtual events. Please welcome Giuliana Gemini, Senior Researcher at Poliedra Politecnico di Milano. Giuliana will share what they have done in Milan through using the digital social market tool in the Sharing Me project. So using the same baseline tool, but having a somewhat different application and different engagement with citizens. Over to you, Giuliana.
Fine, thanks a lot. Here I am, Giuliana Gemini. I work for Poliedra, which is a partner of the Sharing Cities Consortium. And I'm trying to explain you how different was the way we interpreted the DSM in Milano from the way they did in Greenwich. Next. So starting from the same idea of using an ICT tool as a trigger to orient behaviors of people, I can say that we decided to open the DSM to different behaviors, a number as bigger as possible, considering the several sustainable behaviors that people can act, mainly because we didn't start from a sensor activity like they did in London and in Greenwich. And also, we decided, starting from the district area, the pilot area of the Sharing Cities project, which is the Porta Romana district, as we had the chance to have an ICT tool, we decided to open it to the whole city of Milano. So we started our onboarding activity, the selection of the rewarding partners and so on from the district, from the pilot district, but then we opened the community to the whole city. So the way we tried to involve people and stimulate them and engage them in eco themes is that we shaped an already existing app, which is the Green Apes community, to the specific of the Sharing Cities project requirement through a work of user research and some service design we did at the very beginning of our activity. And we had the chance, as Nathan was saying, to follow in some way the eco-agenda ongoing of our Milano local government and to put it in relation with the citizens and local businesses. Next. So the way the Sharing Me community works, you can download it even from England if you want. There are some friends of us at Future Cities Catapult and Nathan too maybe that downloaded the app and you select Milano. And the way you can play is mainly based on 3 different mechanisms. You can share stories and stories can be related to a number of different behaviors organized in some pillars. So you have the mobility one, the one related to your food habits, to the housekeeping habits, and to the purchasing choices. And a 5th pillar is the one in which you can share all the green stories you know, maybe some volunteer activities you did or anything related to some environmental something you read and so on. And when you share a story, then the way it works is like any social tool in which people can interact, comment, give their opinion. And the more they interact, the more the users that sent the story can earn points. Then you have the possibility to earn points through certified behaviors. We managed to link Sharing Me to a few number of third-party sensors and apps, and we are trying to connect, we are testing also the connection with the bike sharing system of Milano City. So when you use this service, you automatically earn points. And then you can earn points through a check-in activity in some events, real-life events that are connected to the app, and through secret codes that you can discover while playing. And the very last way is that during time we propose to the community, which is a way to keep the community engaged, some specific spatial challenges that last for a certain period, and you need to complete a number of steps, and at the end you can have a special reward. Going to the rewarding side, all the points you earn, this is again different from Greenwich, can be redeemable in prices and discounts offered by a number of local Milano city shops, association and activities, or some e-commerce that were already available on the app and that we can use also in the Sharing Me community. What is relevant is that all these rewards has to be coherent with the values and the feeling that are promoted in the Sharing Me community. Next. Here, I'm not going to describe everything. Is the work is a kind of picture of all the work we did. The community was launched in February 2019, and we had a first year birthday party the 20th of February 2020. In light blue in the upper part, you can see all the physical events in which we went to promote and spread the app existing. So this is all a matter of onboarding activity, because there is a number of different apps and the number of places where you can discuss in an online community about your behaviors. This one has some specific characteristic, is promoted together with the Milano municipality. It's rewarding your behavior and so on. So we had to do a lot of work to let people know that the app is there. In red, there are all the challenges we promoted during the first year of life of our community. And most of these challenges were organized together with the municipality again. So when we started in March 2019, it was the time of the plastic-free campaign for Milano. And we launched a specific action to be used in the app on this. Then in May, it was the Food Week, and we launched the Food Revolution Spatial Challenge, and so on. We had the after summer a challenge on biking, and this was the first one organized in different steps. So you have to go by bike, share the way you feel you are a good urban cyclist, and be at some of the events of the Milano Bike City Week. And at the beginning of this year, together with the Legambiente NGO, we organized the Detox Milano, which was a suggestion for people to leave the car at home for 1 week because of a big pollution problem we had at that time. At the very bottom of the slide, there are all the app new release or release of new features, because this is again a crucial point. This app needs to be always adequated, bugs need to be fixed, and the software is always under development so that people can find new mechanisms to be engaged with. Next. Now, a few words on how it went during the COVID. We had the chance to celebrate at the very last days of freedom, let me say. So during the lockdown, Green8 decided to launch a 7-day stay-at-home eco-diary, which we, in Sharing Me, promoted together with Milano and some partners of the Sharing Cities project, which was quite an easy challenge. Let's share the way you feel yourself sustainable at home while being forced to stay at home. But definitely was a way to keep the sense of belonging to the community, and in some way being part of a community can help people to feel less lonely. And I think we had quite a success. 450 people shared the stories, no, 450 stories were shared, which is not exactly the same number of people. And also we had the chance to convince Legambiente to join the app with one new specific user, and they used Sharing Me to promote a program they launched during the COVID lockdown. Next. So few numbers, in some way they are similar to the one that Gemma showed before. Users, we asked them to a questionnaire. They mainly feel that they found themselves more engaged in talking about issues related to the environment and more connected to initiatives, both local and global. And they feel they became more sensitive about their purchasing choices. And what is relevant, it's true, the gamification is a way to trigger them, but the main reason why they play is more for learning one from the other or sharing the way they are to help the city be more sustainable than getting rewards for their behaviors. So very last words about Major Sala, which is suggesting that working on environment needs a change in behavior. So this is our contribution from the Serendipitous project. That's all.
Thank you, Juliana. Another great example of how the tool was used. Particularly interesting to see how it was rolled out citywide, which will no doubt be a question to look at scaling. But also very particularly like the peer-to-peer aspects and learning of it, and the fact that you linked it in with wider city challenges, I think was a great opportunity. Just to briefly remind, I see some questions already coming in through the Q&A, which is great, but please do keep them coming. So if you weren't on before, you can use the Q&A chat box as part of Zoom at the bottom of your screen to ask us any questions for any of the speakers. Finally, it gives me pleasure to introduce our final speaker for today, Ritu Garg, who's a senior transport planner at Arup. So she will give us a short presentation about a recent piece of research that was undertaken by Arup, which is entitled, "You've Declared a Climate Emergency, Next Steps Transport." So she will have a particular focus on sustainable transport and the role that local governments can do in taking some more immediate actions. Ritu, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Ritu Garg, as Lisette mentioned, and I'm a transport planner at Arup. And I'll share my perspective on the role technology has been playing in relation to transport as I begin, and also the role that it can play. Specifically, I'll be sharing a case study from the report that Lisette mentioned on how digital tools can help cities achieve broader goals. So next slide. So just thinking about what's happening today, the rise of technology has already been influencing transport. We use our phones to choose how we move around the city, where we should go for different activities, when we should go, and what we should avoid. Google Maps, Waze, Uber, for example, are all common, well-known examples of this. To date, the most successful and familiar application of technology in transport have been designed to serve the individual and maximize convenience. And technology has been so successful in influencing our individual choices that the small changes that we make in response to technology have actually led to significant disruption on the transport network at a system-wide scale. So cities and government are in a position as responsible parties for managing the system-wide impacts as they make decisions about infrastructure and networks. They found themselves thinking about what is the right way to respond to something like Uber or the potential prevalence of autonomous vehicles, services which could be appealing on a personal individual level, but potentially problematic when they get scaled up. The reason I think this issue happens is because of the disconnect between the public sector and the private sector, this gap that we're trying to bridge in this session today. There seems to be a missing link between government trying to design solutions to complex problems like equity, congestion, air quality from a systems point of view, and businesses in the tech sector who are thinking about outcomes and problems from the perspective of one individual, and not perhaps being aware or being incentivized to think about how pairing their efforts with wider objectives that the city government has could be beneficial for them. So next slide, please. So Like Lisette mentioned, the report we recently published around actions local government can take to start cutting emissions from transport in light of climate emergency is centered around a key theme, which is recognizing the full set of tools and platforms and approaches that can enable behavior change and raise awareness, and recognizing that these aspects are key to achieving sustainability in cities, if we just look at that one objective. So given the prevalence and influence of technology in every part of our lives, we're saying digital solutions are key to enabling this change, and they feature in a lot of the ideas that we present in the report. So next slide. So then focusing that, the research in the report includes a case study of Singapore's Travel Smart Rewards program, which began in 2012. And I want to talk a little bit about this particular example. So at the time this program began, Singapore was facing significant congestion and crowding on its public transport network. As part of accommodating projections for population growth, the city's ongoing plans had already kicked off a process of adding significant infrastructure capacity to their existing public transport network. But because these projects would take time to be implemented and for the benefits of these investments to be realized, Singapore government was also looking for a more near-term solution to relieve the severe crowding on their public transport systems, particularly during the peak periods. So the Travel Smart Rewards program began as a means of addressing this issue. Singapore's Transport Authority partnered with local employers, and they developed a travel planning tool that was open to everyone and which would incentivize people to travel during off-peak periods, so slightly before your preferred time or slightly after. So the tool allowed for people to develop personalized travel plans that would benefit that individual, and it would result in benefits for the overall transport network. The more closely that an individual followed their plan, the more rewards they would receive. They supplemented the effectiveness of this tool by actively introducing the tool through employers, working with employers to implement flexible working policies. They started these monthly lucky draw events, and the chances of you winning the lucky draw were based or would be increased based on the number of times an individual had traveled during the off-peak period, or the number of times they had moved to the less crowded car in a train. So the program has been a success, and over time, this has contributed to a 12% increase in the number of commuters that are traveling after or before the morning peak period, even though in the same time, the ridership has only grown by 2%. So there's been a significant shift in the times that people have been traveling. The program's now transitioning into a Travel Smart Journeys program, which will try to do a very similar thing, but instead of just looking at time, it's going to look at people that are traveling on congested corridors, and it's going to encourage them to consider taking different modes or consider a different route to their final destination. So the reason I chose this study is because I think it's a really powerful example in terms of the potential impact digital tools can have in achieving very precise changes in preferences. Usually, if as transport planners, we want to create some sort of a change, we have to look more broadly, and we can't quite come down to the level of detail as trying to shift the chosen time that people have for traveling by a few minutes. But because of technology, we do have a means to start influencing choices to that level of precision. The scheme and strategy was really sophisticated. They didn't ask people to just choose a different mode altogether, because a lot of these people were already using public transport. And by incentivizing people in such a nuanced way, they were able to impact and make a difference by just taking a small share of people and significantly relieve the congestion that they were experiencing during the peak hour. So I think it illustrates what happens if government uses digital tools in an integrated manner, and if we align the implementation of these tools alongside policy, alongside engaging with a wide range of stakeholders, and acknowledging that if every small factor that plays into our decision making is aligned in the direction of change, a lot of those bigger complex problems that cities have to deal with can be overcome. That's it.
Thank you, Ritu. I think we can all agree on a great example of digital citizen engagement to address some sustainable changes. And I think it also really illustrates the point you made, Ritu, about the need for different actors to come together. So not just government implementing a tool or citizens doing something differently, but also how there is a need to involve wider industry through the employers who need to change their policies as well in order for these tools to work. So I think that illustrated that very well. We're now over to our more interactive part of today's event, and it's great to see some questions already coming in through the Q&A, so I'm going to start picking up on some of those. I think the first one is probably one for Nathan. Are you considering moving to renewable energy London and project-wide? If smart cities advocate low energy and low carbon, shouldn't there be an active move away from fossil fuels, and what is the strategy in this? Nathan, do you want to talk a little bit about links between Smarter London and some of the wider mayoral strategies?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lisa. It's a really good question. I think it's at the heart of what we've been trying to do in our building retrofit program. So even though Sharing Cities is a project that is specifically testing the smart controls, so the smart digital technology aspect, it's really important that you get the basics right. It's no good putting smart and digital controls in if you're still using fossil fuels or if you've still got inefficient buildings and so on. So I think it's a really important part of what we're doing. The Smarter London Together roadmap very much supports the Mayor's London Environment Strategy. There's quite a lot of cross-pollination between the two, and the environment strategy from the Mayor that was released, I think, 2018, has a commitment for London to become zero carbon city by 2050. Quite a lot of work to do in order to get to that point, particularly a city as large and diverse as London. And the Mayor has some powers to achieve this, and it's running a number of projects. I think things like Energy for Londoners, the launch of London Power, which is the new 100% green power energy offer to Londoners, and projects like Sharing Cities, all kind of contribute to the shift away from fossil fuels. Also, we're looking quite a lot at how the Greater London Authority and the London boroughs and the public sector in general in London procure energy, and how it's part of our contracts and how we use that power to ensure that we procure less or no fossil fuels at all. And also we look at how we can use our convening power as the regional authority to encourage others in the private sector and in other sectors to divest from fossil fuels as well. However, there is always that challenge that we will always bring up as a devolved regional authority, that without more devolved powers, much of the ability to do things in this area depends on decisions made by central government. So we're always lobbying government to do more to help us to make London zero carbon as quickly as possible. So there's quite a lot of links. It's not a strategy that I particularly lead on, but we definitely work with people who do.
Thank you, Nathan. Another question what came in, I think, right on the back of Gemma's presentation was, does the plan exist in other cities or is it only available in London at the moment? I think that was partly already answered by the fact that we were followed by Juliana's presentation, and of course, Sharing Cities being a 6-city project. I think the other part worth mentioning here is that Sharing Cities are now in the phase of disseminating all their learnings and devising a series of playbooks to share with other cities, as well as with businesses around the learnings they've done, and kind of sharing those tools with other cities that may want to implement similar projects. I don't know if anybody, Gemma or Juliana, wants to add anything to that.
No, I just, echo what you said. I think, Greenwich Energy Hero at the moment only exists in Greenwich, but as Nathan said at the beginning, we've got so much ambition around scale up and sharing our learning that as that data, gets analysed by Imperial and we've got the evidence to say, this is a benefit it can have to your city, we really want to share it.
Great, thanks, Gemma. And Nathan, am I right that the playbooks will also be published and accessible to everyone?
Yes, I think this is probably an opportunity for a bit of a plug. We've got the Digital Social Market Playbook is available now. I'm just thinking, yes, definitely is. Just wanted to check that before I told everybody. So if you Google Sharing Cities, we could probably share the link as well. If you Google sharingcities.eu and then you go to the page resources, we've got the Digital Social Market Playbook on there, developed by us and Connecting Places Catapult, which goes into quite a lot of detail about how we designed, implemented, and delivered the digital social market in each of the 3 cities. So that's really good for anybody who's interested in replicating or taking an aspect of what you've heard today and doing it in and replicating it in the work that you do. We also welcome conversations from anybody, particularly other cities who might be interested in deploying something like the digital social market. And just to add to what was said previously, we are actively having a conversation right now at a London level with various people like Transport for London and some of the London boroughs about how we can scale up what happened in London to what happened in Greenwich to the rest of London and to other London boroughs, and how we can look at ways that we mainstream or integrate the learning from digital social market into some standard practices, such as Oyster card payments, for example. And this is a conversation that's happening right now.
Thanks, Nathan. We've got quite a few questions to go through, so we're going to ask the panelists to be succinct in their answers so we can address as many as possible. Juliana, you mentioned that Greenwich and Milan's approaches were different. I suppose a question for you and for Gemma: if you could start again, would you change your approach, or would any of the follower cities look to adopt either of your approaches?
Well, to add another different, Lisbon is already doing something different from what we described. They have another DSM and they are mainly working on school community and the points are earned for some stuff, some energy stuff of the school itself. More than changing our road, I would suggest to integrate. So I think that it would be interesting to use the experience of the Greenwich Hero to make the quantitative behavior in the Sharing Me community and app stronger, and maybe we can give an help to enlarge to other behaviors the choices done for the Greenwich Hero.
Thanks, Juliana. Gemma, any other thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think that the great thing about the kind of the framework of a digital social market is it can be applied to whichever challenge a city wants to address. And yeah, I think as Juliana said, I don't think I'd do anything differently, because even the things that didn't work, there's value in learning what doesn't work. But you know, if we can expand this, we'd love to. And you know, it would be about, you know, bringing in different behaviors and different actors to kind of, you know, expand it and, you know, make even more of that framework that's been built. Thanks,
Gemma. Questions for Ritu. I'm going to take 2 together. One question: where can I learn or read more about the case study on Singapore? And second to that, what would need to happen to implement something like that in London? Clearly seems to be a benefit given social distancing requirements. The obvious question that was going to come up. Over to you, Ritu.
Yeah, so in terms of learning more about the case study, you can look at our report that we published. If you search for climate emergency air transport, you'll see it. I think separately, so it was Singapore's Land Transportation Authority that implemented the program, so you can search for them and read about it online. It's the Travel Smart Rewards program. And then in terms of how do you implement something like this in London, or how do you implement something like this in any city, is the key golden question. And I think that happens by, if we want to purposely make it happen, I think it happens by when we start thinking about, oh, we have XYZ transport problem. We, instead of going to only people that work in that industry, so only going to transport planners and engineers and transport policymakers, we need to widen the door a bit. And you know, maybe the city has some sort of an innovation platform, or by engaging with people like Nathan, we need to bring together a wider set of stakeholders from the very beginning. So if we know we have great universities that are training computer scientists, and or if we put out calls for competition saying the city has this problem, we are looking to develop a solution that meets XYZ criteria, and we will reward the person that comes up with the best solution. Different cities have tried these different models, and I think that is the best way of actually truly achieving innovation in your solutions. It's by being more open in terms of who you talk to when you're looking for solutions, and also giving people a reason to participate. So in, you know, having more competitions involving people of all ages to be creative, and that inherently, I think, allows for things like this to happen.
Thank you. And I'd say certainly now seems a good time because everybody's attention is entirely focused on this, both from the individual point of view, certainly from the government point of view, and the transport organisers. To some degree, I think the momentum has been compared or in different ways to the lead up to the 2012 Olympics, when there was also a need to engage people and employers and everyone around the city to travel differently. So it has been shown it can be done, perhaps in a slightly different way. Nathan, did you want to add anything to that from a City Hall perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, similar to what you're saying. I think one of the challenges that we face, and not unique to London, but it's going to be similar for lots of cities, is as we move from lockdown, people are quite rightly very worried about using public transport, and there'll be potentially an increase in people who want to drive into the city to go to work. Something that for a number of years, successive mayors have been trying to encourage people out of their cars as much as possible. So this kind of incentivization mechanism that we've been discussing today could very well play a role in encouraging people to continue to choose low carbon forms of getting into London and getting around London. And I think this is something that is going to be a really important part of the recovery plans that the recently launched Recovery Task Force is going to be looking at over the coming weeks.
Thanks, Nathan. A couple of other interesting questions that I might bring together, some of which were from the same person, which are around tips to consult with the public when introducing projects like this. And the more specific questions around how do you engage different types and ages of public, i.e. schools, families, etc. And how do you kind of engage individuals who may not have access to digital tools. So I guess it's a question around social inclusion, digital inclusion. So I might take those together. I might start with Juliana, particularly as I know in North of Italy has quite an elderly population. So the social inclusion part might be quite interesting to answer.
Thank you. The main work at the beginning, we focused on the Sharing Cities Partners point of view, which is already a number of people to be consulted to understand how to build the app. But I can say that we continued asking people what they feel and if they have any suggestion on how to improve the app, both inside Sharing Me community through this periodic questionnaire activity we do, and in every physical event we did. So, and again, the physical event, I think, and the way we promoted the app are the key answer to in which way we reached different kind of targets to join the community, because we were present in some environmental NGO events for family, and to the design week, and in a fair of sustainable and proper behaviors and so on. We decided not to have kids in the app. The app is only for people over 16 years, as far as I remember. So we didn't focus very much on students and the school, but we went to some events at the Politecnico to reach the young target of people at university. We didn't do any specific job on digital inclusion. I don't know if this is maybe something we should reflect on, because the focus of the activity was a digital tool, and we can say something about social inclusion on behavioral change and environmental themes engagement. But in some way, I feel if you choose the way of using an ICT tool, you already the problem is combining different tools. This is not the only tool that the city should focus on to include different kind of targets, but this is a digital one. I don't know if you feel, Gemma or Nathan, on this.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear a perspective from Gemma as well, but it is indeed a challenge if you choose a digital tool, bearing in mind that even in London, there's a percentage of people that don't have smartphones, for example, and therefore can't be reached through this particular method.
You can play through the web. You don't really need a smartphone, but then mainly the activity goes to that target, and it's for instance, there's no translation in other languages, so you need to be Italian speaker, a proper Italian speaker to be able to play. So this is something, again, that maybe we should think about, having different languages for different communities.
Right. Gemma, any quick reflections from you?
Yeah, so I guess similar to Milan, you know, this was a digital tool. You had to have Wi-Fi and an app to use it. And that is a flaw, and that if residential demand side response was, you know, extended across the country, that would need to be addressed. But, you know, we are aware of it. We did also kind of in our user research stage, kind of really try to speak to and go into people's homes who are kind of less digitally enabled. So they have a smartphone, but maybe they, you know, they have a handful of actions that they perform on it. You know, maybe they, you know, receive texts and emails and plan their journeys, but they're not, you know, a digital native. They don't have hundreds of apps. So, you know, we did try to include in the design and in the research stage the less digitally included. And then kind of, I guess, on kind of tips for consultation, I think, yeah, it was really important to engage in both the kind of the discovery and the design stage to kind of, as I said, you know, go into people's homes. If we're asking people to change their behavior in the home, we really needed to get there to understand it. And then it was also really useful to kind of, when we're further on in the design stage, to kind of reflect back once we'd designed, you know, to kind of get even further feedback about reaching different types of people. I think it's about tapping into existing networks. So we did kind of offline and online recruitment. So the offline recruitment was often in communities that already existed. So in community groups that are already having a meeting, going there and, you know, having a little store and speaking to them, rather than trying to kind of intercept people at events that we kind of tried to make up ourselves.
Great, thanks, Gemma. Yeah, it shows we need to use different tools and collaborate with different parties. I'm just going to ask each panelist to give one final, very, very quick thought. It's a very big question, so you literally get to say one challenge, but what are the biggest commercial and or technical challenges that you see in driving greater and more impactful smart city projects? It's a huge question, and we could probably debate a whole hour on that. Let's say if there's one challenge you could name, or something that you've learned from the project you've done, what would it be? So Nathan, I'll give you 10 seconds for that one. You're still on mute though.
One of the big things that we have found, particularly through Sharing Cities and the work of the Smart London team, is cities need to become much better at expressing their needs to the marketplace. The technology is largely there, the solutions for most things are there, but cities need to become much better at understanding what outcome they're working towards, and then being able to go to the marketplace with a bit of confidence and procure technology for that outcome.
Thanks, great answer, Nathan. Ritu, we'll come to you.
Yeah, very quickly. I think quality and critical mass, and knowing when do you need to develop a new solution versus when should you collaborate with someone to have them do it. For example, should London create its own app to advise people on how to travel, or should it collaborate with Citymapper or Google Maps, which already have a critical mass, to add on something that they want to do?
Right, the aspect of open innovation. Juliana, any thoughts from you?
Well, if I think to the Milano case study, I would say that one problem is having the app as a property of the city itself, which is not the case of Sharing Me. So this is now something that you have to think about. And when they think about involving businesses and so on, they have to put, the municipality has to put themselves in the game and try to involve them as rewarding partners. So the more the rewards are public in some way, the public transport, the energy, and so on, I would say the more effective all the game would be.
Thank you, Juliana. And final 20 seconds for Gemma.
I think that, you know, through the Sharing Seats program, we've tested lots of different devices in kind of energy and transport, and we've got loads of really great live data. I think the big challenge for us, now that we've proven that the technology works, is actually how can we better use that data to transform our services. And it's a massive undertaking to try and, you know, do proactive maintenance and, you know, take proactive steps based on that data. And we've really got to redesign stuff, and that's a really big challenge.
Thanks, Gemma, and thanks everyone for the concise answers to a very, very big question, but some very good comments there. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, sadly. I think we've got much more that we could discuss, but we'll have to close here, and I hope the audience all found it as interesting as I personally did. I'd like to finish by, first of all, thanking all our speakers for their time and their wonderful insights, contributions. I'd like to thank New London Architecture for organizing today's event, and also London Waste and Recycling Board for putting on a wonderful Circular Economy Week full of other activities. And of course, thank you for our great audience and all your amazing questions. For those of you who'd like to recap or have missed parts or would like to share it with colleagues, the recording from today's session will shortly be available on both the NLA website and also the Circular Economy Week website. Thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.